got my ocarina, need to make the rubies, save the sacred princess and smoke a couple doobies. What's the magic song that I need to play to reverse time? What? I can't, okay. But I got to save the planet from the shadow, the secret battle. I got a pony, now where's my saddle? Been trapped in a bubble for the last 7 years. Now the whole world's run by the worst fears. But I can defeat Ganon with my solar cannon.
Alright, good morning everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the show. This is the morning, not so creepy deepy show. We're talking about real events today, and we have some major events to talk about that have developed over the past 12 hours or so. So last night we kind of tried to touch on the idea of the Syrian gas attacks, and we were kind of, bumping into some issues of going, well, why, who are the attacks based on? Why did they happen? And I think the reason that we had so much trouble confirming any of that is because nobody fucking knows specifically why the attacks happened. Nobody knows, there's no one's really claiming a reason why. Assad's not, claiming a reason why yet. A lot of people think it's even questionable that Assad would launch a major gas attack like this because it's just provoking. What inevitably happened last night, which we kind of briefly touched on, which is that we launched 50 Tomahawk missiles at the Syrian government's bases, Air Force. So, are we at war with Syria? Probably.
A $90 million move. That's speaking in volumes. That's taxpayer money going towards this one decision before really any conclusions were drawn. Now.
No, go ahead.
I'm just. My question to you is: where did you say these missiles were shot at? What specific location were they shot at?
So the missiles were fired. I don't have the exact name of the city, but essentially they were all on military bases. So they were fired at essentially destroyed a lot of the Air Force, destroyed some of their chemical or potential chemical manufacturing bases. So essentially just a military strike against the Syrian military.
Okay, well you said they destroyed some of their chemical bases, chemical plants. Is that what you're?
That's the reported target, or one of the reported targets was a potential chemical manufacturing base, as well as some Air Force military base and stuff like that.
Well, I just want to give a special shout out to Jamie for sharing this information with me this morning. When you were talking to me about this, and we were talking about it last night, this morning Jamie sent me a few images that are going around. I don't know if you want to bring them up right now, but the Disillusionist will bring them up eventually. But one of these images is referring to the fact that John Kerry mentions, and I believe it was 2008, that Syria relieved themselves of all their chemical weapons in an attempt to display peace, if I'm not mistaken. So John Kerry made this statement, and if you want to pull this image up, feel free, just to kind of back me up on this.
Right.
And this is kind of striking up some controversy across the internet because it's not to say it's impossible to acquire more chemical weapons by now, but at the same time, it does kind of contradict the idea that was portrayed to us not so long ago.
Right.
And another thing about these images that were sent is there's a comparison of what this poisonous gas is supposed to do to a person that's not wearing any gloves or any body protection, and you're not supposed to handle bodies that are saturated in this. I believe it's called sarin. Sarin. I don't know how to.
Sarin gas,
Sarin,
yeah.
sarin gas. Okay.
Uh,
Um, you're not supposed to handle this without protective body equipment on. Like basically a hazmat suit. You need to wear a hazmat suit because this is a situation where that would be the perfect um, material to wear, uh,
right.
so that you yourself are not also being, you don't succumb to this poisonous gas as well. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's images of these alleged events occurring in the aftermath, and there are, a bunch of people like Syrian rebels that are just wearing masks, not any gloves, and picking up children. Not to say that couldn't be real. They could be risking the chance of getting that on their hands to pick up, these bodies and such. But at the same time, there are suggestions that Syrian rebels are using this staged kind of event to create a reaction, and they use the comparison of like what treating a real room full of bodies that have been affected by sarin gas would actually look like. It's a bunch of people in hazmat suits. Nobody's not wearing a hazmat suit because they're all handling these bodies and they know what to expect. Um,
Right.
but at the same time, this is in Syria, and if these are Syrian rebels, do they have the same materials? Do they have the
Mm-hmm.
same resources? So that's another thing to keep in mind too.
Yeah, it's what's interesting to me is we're claiming that it was sarin gas, and I can see that some of the discrepancies that people are pointing out in the treatment, um, whether that points to it being sarin gas or not, I'm not 100% sure of, but it does raise some questions. Also, it could have been a chemical attack that wasn't sarin. That's another bit of information that could be coming out due to the fact that we're all of what seems to have happened over the past day has been an extraordinarily reactionary kind of response. For instance, I mean, we launched 50 missiles without the approval of Congress. No one's really taken a vote on whether this is okay. It's all we don't. I think the biggest issue that brings up is we don't know the facts. We don't know 100% of what is going on, and yet we're still making these major moves that can easily implicate starting not only a war with Syria, but where people are starting to get worried is that Syria is allied with Russia. And so, this is would seem, even Donald Trump has some tweets from a couple of years back or a year or so back about the poor move of attacking Syria because we don't really have anything to gain, and we really only have our small kind of peace ties with Russia to break. That's the biggest thing we're risking is attacking Syria, which is an ally of Russia, and essentially which is a big fuck you to Russia.
It's
You know.
interesting. It's interesting too to think that the CIA, right before all this, really wanted this idea of Russia hacking us to affect the minds of the public, and up to the point where people think that Donald Trump's presidency had something to do with Russia hacking us, maybe even our voting systems. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to see how this is all potentially tied together. Maybe
Well, and I think that even Noam Chomsky recently was talking about that. I mean, I think all of this posturing, this anti-Russian posturing, doesn't make any fucking sense. A lot of what's coming out is alleged, connections between Trump and Russia, and those are all being made by the CIA. And we just recently learned that the CIA has the ability to fingerprint Russia or other countries for their own acts. That they have potentially done that before. So it's we're kind of watching a big play kind of go on right now. We're watching the enacts of, hey, Russia's bad and they got Trump into power, and without any real proof. We're not really putting out any actual proof. It's just the CIA saying this shit. And now we know we have no fucking reason in the world to trust the CIA. That they intentionally are throwing other countries under the bus. And now, yeah, our posturing, our anti-Russian posturing could potentially lead us into a war with Russia. And if we get into a war with Russia, then we're looking at sparking a world war. You know, Russia has they're the exact other end of the coin. They're the flip side of the coin as far as who they're allied with, and most of their allies are our enemies. You know, as far as the global war spectrum is seen.
It's interesting how even in fictional game series, I won't name which ones, but in a lot of fictional wartime game series, you have uh, the big baddies as depicted by Russia and China. And it's always kind of been instilled in us as an American people that Russia may very well attack us one day, or China may very well attack us one day. And I'm pretty sure the premise behind Fallout, the whole Fallout series, is a war between China, America, and I mean, I wouldn't be. I'm pretty sure I'm not mistaken that Russia is also involved in that, because it is a world war that ends with nuclear devastation and then the aftermath. And it's
I
ironic
saw
how
I
you.
saw someone made a comment on a post I was looking at earlier that was like Fallout 5 Beyond VR. Like that's what are going to be our reality soon, you know.
Well, I got to point this out real quick. I think the problem with us as a society, specifically American society, like the only way I can generalize and say the problem with us in this regard is that we joke about these problems because we don't know how else to deal with them. And it would be one thing if there were no, death toll, then it would be a joke. But the difference between a joke and a tragedy is a death toll. Like we don't know what to do because we're nervously chattering away over here about all the decisions we aren't making, but our country is actively making, just because one branch of our government decided to do something without any approval from any of the other branches. It's a very serious action. And yeah, like you're saying, if it triggers a world war, we need to establish the facts before we make these kinds of actions. Because if the American people should have a say in any of this, why aren't we having a say in this? Why don't we get to decide when these missiles are being shot and why before they are and not after? Because we shouldn't have to defend ourselves as individuals when people get mad enough to come here and start attacking us as random individuals because we don't know any better, because we're so ignorant that we don't realize we're funding all of this in a roundabout way, in a very twisted roundabout way. It's not my fault directly, it's not your fault directly or yours, but the fact that we aren't acting to stop it faster and sooner, which is also much easier said than done. I mean,
Right.
it just proves
Well,
our fault to some extent,
and I got in a small argument with somebody this morning on social media about, they were trying to say that, because someone was like, we just launched 50 missiles at Syria, and this person was like, well, we didn't. It was, we're not doing that. And I was like, well, you know, you can say that as much as you want, but we're fucking paying for it, dude. You pay taxes, we're all responsible for that shit. And I don't see the point in trying to pacify our individual guilt by saying, "Oh, I had nothing to do with that," when it's like, yeah, we have to own up to the fact that we all have something to do with this, dude.
Yeah.
We're all making this happen. We're paying for this to happen. And until we realize that, until we confront that, we're gonna keep, having a passive approach to it. We need to get active, and we need to start making demands and saying, I don't want to fucking pay for this shit.
Well,
we
that's
just
what
dumped. Oh, go ahead.
that's what protesting is supposed to be. It's your expression of your freedom to go out and rally up and peacefully say, "Hey, we don't want to kill innocent people." And someone very close to me a long time ago once said that your guilt is a moral compass of sorts. And it makes a lot of sense, because if your guilt is something that you're trying to hide from yourself and there are realer issues at play, the only way that you're going to grow up and face them is by growing up and facing them. Like you have to face these troubles that you're having with yourself, this inner guilt. and see where it's coming from, especially if it's coming from these external factors that you know you have nothing to do with, but it's still affecting you because, like, you are indirectly still funding something, even if it's just a 0.0001% of this destruction and mayhem. If you can use that 0.001% and combine it with every other percentage that doesn't like that happening, maybe it can actually shift it in the opposite direction. So instead of going to war with all these different countries, we just kind of refrain from just attacking each other without figuring out who's to actually blame. Like, because people are really good at blaming people without knowing for sure, is this the
Well,
person?
and blame displacement is kind of a natural response, man. I mean, it's, oh, I'm not at fault for this. I'm not taking any responsibility for this. But that's, at this point in time, that's the last fucking thing we need in the world is people going, I'm not respond. No, we need to stand up and have some fucking balls and say, yeah, we're all responsible for this, and what the fuck are we gonna do about it? You know, we got to be realistic.
Yeah, we do need to be realistic. That's a very good point because I don't think realism is something that is instilled in us either necessarily, because the way that history is taught to us and the way that it's almost rewritten, like at just at any given point that it needs to be to make us act the way we need to. It's propaganda instead of actual history. To the point,
Right.
like, and this is my prime example I always bring up, is that there was a time, I don't know if it was just Texas history, or what portions of American history it was, like in terms of nation to nation, but in the public school system, they were trying to remove Thomas Jefferson. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of, like, from history books, they just didn't need to mention him anymore, despite the fact that he was a president that grew hemp and, like, so, like, kind of had a more passive. Well, I wouldn't say he was more passive in terms of slavery because he was a slave owner as well. But I think that he may have potentially viewed those kinds of world views in a different light, in a maybe more peaceful light. And I think it had a lot to do with the reasoning behind why he was seen as, like, a person that should be taken out of history, because it kind of, like, every time you have this person that thinks a little bit differently and has these forms of free thought that they try to express upon the public, they usually
Mm-hmm.
get a smear campaign after the fact of some sort, you know.
Well, Jefferson didn't he was the one who like rewrote a good portion of the Bible and
Well,
published like a book called, what was it, like the New Teachings of Jesus, which was like, let's talk about the stories of Jesus and let's remove all the magic hooey dooey bullshit and let's just talk about, like, Jesus is like, hey, rich people, fucking blow off, you suck, you're
yeah,
ruining the world, you know,
yeah.
like all those kind of teachings.
I mean,
Um,
you're paraphrasing, but yeah, he took all the. I think it was everything that Jesus said was in, like, red ink or red letters in
uh,
certain Bibles. I'm not entirely sure how it breaks down, but I know that he took, like, only, yeah, like you're saying, he took only the things that Jesus said. He didn't rewrite anything. He just took out the things that this alleged prophet said that were, like, really inspirational, and that got him killed, essentially, because this dude, if he did exist during the Roman Empire, he was going around telling people that the Roman Empire was evil, and
mm,
the Roman Empire assassinated him or tried to or whatever. um,
right.
and so I think that played a big role in why, if you just take out all his teachings and you ignore the Sumerian mythology that's been rewritten and rewritten and rewritten, you see this dude that's like, hey, things are messed up. You shouldn't worship me. You should look at me as a person that maybe you look up to, that you try to be like, in
Mm,
terms of, if you have one really cool inspirational artist that people walk up to and they're like, "Whoa, I love your art. It's so great." The artist normally, if they don't want to feel like they want to inflate their ego, they'll be like, "Well, you can do art too. You can do
mm.
these things as well. You can be like me, like an artist, and you can express yourself in this way." I think that's a really
Right.
good way of interpreting that. And so,
Yeah, and the idea that, you know, let's teach about, because that's the thing, I don't have any, major problems with, the things that Jesus said. I don't think anybody does. They seem to be pretty good life lessons. It's this, deification of a guy who was probably just a guy,
yeah,
um, which is, it's kind of silly to get into the idea of, like, well, he fed so many people with this one, couple loaves and some fishes, and it's like, well, that clearly that's not fucking true. Like that, there's
Metaphor
some weird.
probably for sharing with your neighbor. Like we keep talking about community, and I think
Right.
like this simplified version of that is just to teach a story about I could take one piece of bread and give it to 30 people. That's not a
Mhm.
lot of food, but everybody feels like they ate something at that point, and
Yeah. Yeah.
nobody feels like they were left out. Like that.
Mhm.
That's kind of that is what that reflects. It's not like, oh man, with one loaf of bread I could feed the whole world. No,
Yeah.
with the right kind of vegetables you could feed the whole world. It would take time. There's a reality to those kinds of ideas, but yeah, at the same time, look at what taking these things literally has done to the planet. Especially when you take these old myths and then you have a group of men that are trying to reform the planet, they just take all the stories and they rewrite them and bunch them all together, and then it literally creates war across the entire planet. And then we're still dealing with these wars because of,
Well, and
you know,
and and that's that the posturing that I'm seeing right now. It's very fucking similar to the weapons of mass destruction posturing that we saw to get us into Iraq and Iran. It, it's it's fucking ridiculous. We started those wars, what, 15 some odd years ago, and we're still in those wars. And Obama did, he was like, hey, we're gonna back out of Iraq. I'm gonna get us out of there. Fucking didn't do that at all. Um, and now we're posturing to go to war with Syria because one of the things that one of the bits of information that I think is interesting about Syria is they're one of the last countries that doesn't have any ties to a World Bank kind of institute.
that's
Um,
interesting. That is an interesting coincidence. I don't know if that's
right.
a coincidence.
I think they're the last country in the Middle East that doesn't have any World Bank ties. So it's very telling that now we're beating the war drum on them because now hey, you're not playing ball with America. Why aren't you playing ball? Well, maybe it's time to blow your ass up and teach you to play ball. And right now we're seeing some of the spookier kind of aspects of this is we're seeing the stock prices of Boeing and Lockheed Martin and all these other weapons manufacturers just climbed up this morning.
Sell,
Just hiked
sell,
up.
sell.
Yeah, which is what else can I think about that than the people in the know, the people with money to throw down are looking at Lockheed Martin, looking at these weapons and missile manufacturers that are like they see us launching those missiles and are going, oh yeah, we're about to start fucking blowing shit up. Let's start paying for weapons because that's gonna that's gonna be where the money's at in the near future. We're
Lockheed,
gonna start.
Lockheed Martin also has some interesting ties to a lot of these alleged UFO sightings. Or Ben Rich, the secondary founder. I mean, he wasn't a founder, but he was the second person in line to help run the facility in the beginning. He basically, right before he died, stated that like we have all the technology to go, to ET and back, to ET's home and back in a blink of an instant. But it's so wrapped up under black budget funding and just red tape that it's never going to see the light of day. And these are the kind of technologies that could stop these lesser, more primitive technologies from affecting the world. If you had a technology that could disable missiles before it ever hit something else, like we could we could do that to, like, if a branch of our government, it's like okay, if we're using a comic book reference as an example, it's like a Justice League episode where some mad uh, guy gets a hold of these missile codes and then goes to this one establishment, launches the missiles without permission from anyone else. If you had a device that could disable those missiles so that no innocents died, you would use that. And it's interesting to think that these companies are just profiting from the war when they also may even have the technologies to stop all this from happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're showing, I think we now know, it's a pretty obvious fact of history that weapons manufacturers, they don't want fucking peace. Why would they want peace? Peace means they don't make any money, dude. The more we blow shit up, the more aggro that America gets with the rest of the world, the more money that they make in the long run. And every major politician has ties to these weapons manufacturers. They accept money from these weapon manufacturers. So we're looking at a political system which has no incentive to not go to war and has every incentive monetarily to blow as much shit up as physically possible. Which, for me, it's like there's no like I've been seeing a lot of people who are defending the missile strikes and are like, it had to happen. Like I was just arguing with the soldier a moment ago. It had to happen, had to happen. What? Fuck you! It had to happen. It's like that's like finding out. Even if the gas attacks are real, that's like finding out your neighbor is beating his wife, so you burn his house down. It's like, how does destruction, how does aggression lend anything to the situation? How does that benefit anyone in the situation to be like, oh, there's devastation and attacks going on?
Especially children in the houses and nobody got to agree on it beforehand.
Right. It's it's this weird reaction to be like, oh, there's some crazy shit going on in this country. I bet blowing a bunch of shit up would probably help. I bet fucking dropping millions and almost $100 million in fucking bombs, that'll probably help that situation, right?
The people making decisions should not have the right nor the ability to make them as if it were a consensus made by an entire nation. Because that is the reality of that. Like, we need to be able to come together as a nation and decide. And it's problematic to think that there are very few people making those kinds of nearly $100 million decisions in one day in one fell swoop.
Well, you should have to jump through an insane amount of hoops to get to firing missiles. That's I don't see why you wouldn't. Because even if you've got the American population on board, which let's not forget that the American population was on board when we started attacking Iraq. That was, a lot. The majority of Americans, because of 9/11, were like, yeah, we gotta do that. That's in our best interest. So even if everyone's on board, when we're talking about potentially starting a war, and when we're talking about potentially starting a war with someone like Russia, if that's at all on the table, you can't just do it overnight. It can't be a decision made overnight of like, yeah, drop 50 Tomahawk missiles. That's fine. That's totally okay. There needs to be a heavier, more serious consideration of the repercussions of those actions.
Well, I think the first point is that the very first thing you said is we don't know exactly what happened. We need more conclusive evidence as to who to attack before we just start attacking people, because you had those controversial images being sent around of people not wearing hazmat suits and trying to treat it like it was a sarin gas attack. And so it does make things more questionable. We need more conclusive evidence to decide who's to blame before we just, throw $100 million away and innocent people die in the process.
Right. Right, and I was also going to mention the fact that the Russian warship, whether we've got some warships that have been moving towards the area in which our warships had fired the cruise missiles from. But I did also, doing a little bit of research, ping back some results that showed that those warships may have been moving towards that area before we ever fired our missiles off. So it might just be a coincidence that they're moving to that area, and I guess we won't know. But I'm also, outside of that, I'm seeing people talk about how we're upping the ante to having a ground fight in Russia. And there's also been some reports from different people in the military who are saying they're hearing back from their friends in other parts of the military that are saying that people are getting ready to put boots on the ground out in Syria. This is the last thing we need, man. This is the last thing we need, and I think most Donald Trump supporters can agree that people who back Donald Trump, a lot of people were saying, well, he said he didn't want to get into Syria, and I think that at this point, arguing over that's a little pointless, because we just need to recognize that America has been pounding the goddamn war drum since I've been alive.
Yeah.
I've never known a time as a human being on this planet that America wasn't involved in some sort of aggro tactics somewhere in the world, typically in the Middle East.
And there seems to also be a pattern, as long as I've been alive at least, where presidents are pretty much set up on this pedestal to look a certain way and to say a certain thing so that people feel comfortable with the decisions that are being made behind closed doors. And then after the fact, he can be the scapegoat, you know, or she,
Right.
if there ever had been or will be a female president. But at the same time, that's not the point. My point is that this figurehead can be used as a scapegoat while the real decisions are being made. And it's becoming much more apparent, especially with a person like Donald Trump being president, because it's so easy to just blow him off as a this like face on Time magazine that everyone wants to spit at or pshaw or even support in some light or another,
Well, and you can see it in the reactions, man. Like, it's fucking upsetting for me to go to. I've gone on some of these articles and looked at the comment sections, and the most upvoted, the most highest rated comments are people just going, "See, Trump supporters, anyone who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, anyone who voted third party, this is your fault. This is your doing." And it's like, can you shut the fuck up and stop jerking yourself off in public for 5 fucking seconds? Can we cut out the masturbatory behavior, and instead, I would expect that the top comment would be something relevant to the article, someone who's trying to talk about the issues, and not someone who's just going, "See, Trump's bad, guy." It's like, grow the fuck up, dude. Where are we in this world, man?
I think there was a consensus on that people knew to some extent or another he may not be the ideal candidate for president, but at the same time he is president right now. Like we were talking about yesterday, that get the fuck over it.
Yeah.
At the same time, you need to keep in mind that the reality behind this is that it's still just a figurehead. It's still just an icon or an image being displayed, in front of the real issues while they're actually happening. So when they're
and
all
also
said,
to negate all of that bullshit, Hillary Clinton, before Trump even fired off any missiles, she was tweeting, "Yeah, we need to attack Assad." So Hillary Clinton would have done the same goddamn shit, dude. Why are we arguing about this?
Exactly. No, I was just about to say that. The same very thing would have happened, and I've kind of argued that I've argued the fact for a long time that the president is literally just like a TV commercial. Like, they say all the things you'd like to hear, and you buy into it to some extent, but then after you buy the thing, you're like, this is not nearly as special or cool as it says it was. That's just like, that's how it's designed. That's how every person sets themselves up to try to become president. That kind of
But the way that I see it, the only difference I see between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party at this point, it's not about policy. It's about the idol in which we currently have in charge. So if it's a Republican president, the idol is a punching bag. If it is a Democratic president, then the idol is a pacifier. That's all that it is. When we've got a Democrat in office, it's like, hey, he's not a bad guy. He just it's the goddamn Republicans that are causing all this bad shit. And Obama's just such a good dude. That's why he's drone striking 7 countries. That's why he's not a fucking good dude. He just makes you feel good because you're like, yeah, he's black and he talks well. He's a well-spoken black man, and I like that. And now we've got Donald Trump, and he's pushing the same fucking agenda. He's pushing us into the same, scary territory with another country. And Trump is just, he's the opposite end of that. Instead of being like, oh, well, it's not his fault. Now it's like, oh, it's all his fault. It's Trump's fault. Let's beat up on this guy. He's the punching bag now.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good way of looking at it. I think that what I was talking about yesterday with you about the jester and the 2 puppets, in the booth in front of the castle is also a great analogy for that, where just because you change out sock puppets on your hand doesn't mean that this is a totally new topic or a new issue in the world.
Yeah.
This is a pattern that's been occurring for a very long time. since before democracy existed, or the concept of it. And now that we think it's been instilled in this nation and we think that it's so different, when you compare modern day events to old ones, they're very similar. They're really not that much different. It's because once you have the right person to look up to that's supposed to be leading the nation, you kind of stop worrying about what's happening outside of where you're living, because we all have our own bubble of existence. It's hard to try to influence anything outside of that or care about it, you know.
Well, and that's the pendulum effect, where it's, it's for the past, what, 30, 40 years, it just keeps going Republican, Democrat, Republican, Democrat. And to me, all that is that's just baiting of people's psychology of like, George Bush is bad and we're all angry. It's stupid old George Bush and look at all the bad shit that he did. And then here comes a Democratic president. Oh, now at least we've got a good president, and he's very nice, and it kind of pacifies people and calms people down, and then it's time to go to another war. So, now we have a shitty Republican president. We're all mad because, it's his fault now. And so then, after 8 years of fucking Trump, there'll be another Democrat after we've all blown each other to hell, and it's, the Democrat, he's going to take care of things, and this is going to be better. And then once things aren't better, another Republican comes in, and just on and fucking on. We see the same goddamn pattern.
Well, let's hope that pattern is broken before then. You know what I mean? I mean, if it needs to be, or if it's the most beneficial thing to do for our nation and maybe even for the planet, then we should, because, I mean, there seems to be too many connections to the World Bank and, innocent lives being taken.
Well, and at this point, yeah, I mean, I think that hopefully most Americans are beginning to understand that what we really need, what the country actually needs, is a complete overhaul of the way our system operates. We need to completely dismantle and rebuild our government, because it's not beneficial to the American people in any way, shape, or form. The same stupid fucking shit keeps happening. It's always, we always act in corporate interests. We always act, right now, though, we're going to war with Syria because we want their fucking money and we want to control them. We want to have absolute control over the Middle East, even if that means devastating that country entirely. I mean, for fuck's sake, dude, there's, what have we done in the Middle East in recent history in the past 15 years? We've killed potentially 500,000 to 1 million civilians, and there are some people who estimate even more than that. And it's like,
I would as well. I would say we killed more than 1 million people. And
right. 500,000 seems to be the number that most people can agree on. That's the number that even Republicans are like, yeah, it seems there's enough evidence that we've probably killed at least 500,000 civilians. That's not combatants. That's people who had nothing to fucking do with, those people don't have anything to do with oil corporations. Those people don't have anything to do with radical Islamists. Those people have nothing to do with any of this shit. And we're blowing them up in the hundreds of thousands to millions.
But since they also have nothing to do with any of us here, as far as we know, it's really easy to disregard it until after the fact. Mm-hmm. And my other question I was going to ask you, though, I don't mean to play devil's advocate too heavily, but I think it's important because we're going to get these kind of questions having this conversation. How without inciting, too much chaos, how would you? I mean, this is a pretty big question, but how would you suggest we dismantle and reform?
The way that I would approach it, first of all, I think we need to acknowledge the fact that a two-party system in what is our current population right here, or this day? Let's see. We're currently at 318 million people. Maybe a little bit more, because that was from the consensus in 2014. So let's say we're probably at about 320 million Americans. The fact that two people are who we argue against, the two people, there's only this choice or that choice, and 2 out of 320 million, how does that make any fucking sense? Where is the sense in that? We can already see in the West that there are parliamentary systems which tend to work a lot better, because the idea is you get a group of people, a big, massive group of people who operate and represent smaller portions of the population, and let them argue it out and dish it out in representation of the smaller group of people, as opposed to just like, yeah, there's one guy represents, this half of the country, and one guy represents this half of the country. There's no way in the world that one person represents, 150 million people. That's just bullshit.
Yeah,
And we should all understand that that's bullshit. So I think, the first steps we need to take is reorganizing how we make decisions as a country, and not just leave it up to two parties. It's completely ridiculous in my mind.
that's a very good point. With even just a little bit more of an expansion in terms of options, where you really feel like these candidates, and they're not just like where Bernie Sanders was literally the only person people felt like they could relate to on a personal level, in one way, shape, or form, because he was speaking to the people and not for corporate interests.
And
And
he wasn't even allowed to run. And
exactly, he was basically bullied out of the entire thing.
And it disgusted me to see the response of the Democratic Party, because I forget the exact quotes, like I'm not giving quotes verbatim, but essentially the DNC was saying, well, Bernie Sanders, even though he got kept out of the nomination process, those are just guidelines. There's nothing illegal going on here. And we as the American people should be pretty fucking pissed off about that we're allowing a group of people that has no federal regulation to skirt democracy, and then when they get called out for skirting democracy, they just go, well, we didn't do anything illegal, so fuck off.
Yeah, it's very similar to the concept of like, you pushed me, no, I didn't, or like or someone using the precise wording of something to avoid actual persecution. Where you're like, well, you said this, and the other person's like, well, actually, I said I would do this, and that only means this. It doesn't mean this. And there's a lot going on too, where we kind of find out about the fine print of a situation much later, and that's part of the reason behind that joke. Like, did you read the fine print?
Well, and that's, to me, it's a completely unacceptable argument for someone to go, hey, you skirted democracy. We have proof to show that you did your best to ensure that the democratic process didn't actually take place. And that's a serious fucking charge. That's something that has proof behind it, where we're saying this is serious business. And for them to go, for the argument back that people for some reason are satisfied with is, well, technically it doesn't matter because we didn't do anything illegal. How is anyone satisfied with that? How are we allowed? To me, that's grounds to be like, okay, well, you know what? The Democratic Party's not a thing anymore. We shouldn't fucking put any effort or any fucking thought into a group of people whose their whole point is to participate in democracy, yet all of their actions have shown to be the exact opposite. They completely skirt democracy.
Yeah,
we should just do away with that.
I think we are living in the age of hypocrisy right now. I think it's an important thing to point out, because as an individual, you can call out your own hypocrisies. It's very easy, and to the point where you can joke about them. And like the people I've been living with, let's go back to a community level. Like, you live with people long enough, you kind of have to recognize certain things about yourself, certain flaws, certain patterns. That is how that is supposed to work in order for things to get better. Now, if you reflect that into the bigger picture, you're supposed to have people that run the government that admit to their wrongdoings and try to do things to fix them. Whenever you have people that go, yeah, I did that, or they just shrug their shoulders and they keep walking, like the whole concept of too big to fail, like we were talking about beforehand, or the fact that Elizabeth Warren has called out a few of these people herself and their actions in this direction or that, and the people that she's talking to, despite her being as direct and as like aggressive without getting in trouble as possible, these people are just kind of skirting the issue, like, yeah, I may have, there may have been stolen money, there may have been some corruption and some,
And this is a simplification of their response, but their response is pretty typically, so what?
Yeah, exactly.
So what? Yeah, who cares? Yeah,
Well,
we did that. So what?
it's the same with Hillary Clinton. I mean, all these Clinton supporters are trying so hard to like keep her on this certain pedestal, despite what about the war crimes? What about all these sinister things that she's tied to, and all of these ways and means she's been going about getting funding are very similar to an organized crime syndicate, and yet we're supposed to treat her differently because she's famous or infamous or a politician that has a lot of money and is friends with Trump.
Oh man, I
So
did.
we don't. So she just doesn't get in trouble, despite like one of the lead FBI directors being like, "What the fuck is your deal?" Like.
Well, when all that shit came out with James Comey and the FBI when they were reviewing what she did, he literally was saying, "Well, with the leaked emails and all that stuff, if anyone in my cabinet, if anybody I employed did that, they'd be fired immediately. Would probably be facing charges that might send them to jail.
Or prison.
But Hillary Clinton, she just didn't know any better, so no biggie." And it's like,
Yeah.
what the fuck are you talking about? She didn't know any better. She was a major part of the government at the time that happened. How is this excusable?
Well,
You
it's
know,
because she's a senile old woman now, and her mind is literally falling apart, and all this stress isn't helping to the point where she had a personal doctor following her around and making sure that she didn't need her special little shot to keep her going because she has some sort of brain condition, if I'm not mistaken. That was supposed.
allegedly, yeah.
It was supposed to be secret that she had these health problems until after she became president, right? But
Right.
because everything fell apart, especially due part to WikiLeaks, it just like everything kind of blew up in her face, and yet she is still not facing charge.
No, zero accountability.
Put her away, because
Zero accountability.
that would mean that the American people have to accept that this is what happens to corrupt politicians. It hasn't happened yet. Every
Well,
time a corrupt politician's called out, they just disappear. Like it's the case of the Nixons, where they just step back and go, you know what, peace, and then they
Bye.
just,
No real accountability. Nothing. No
where
real
did they go?
punishments.
Just because
You know it.
some pictures of them after the fact, it's like, where the fuck did they go? They're not being held accountable.
No, and what really pissed me off, dude, I think the biggest smoking gun that I saw during the election process, and anyone with a fucking brain who isn't completely retarded, like if you got Down syndrome, then maybe you have an excuse to not see this, but everyone in the know, everyone with the evidence laid in front of them should understand that the Clinton Foundation is a fucking money laundering scam, and the fact that that Hillary Clinton would go give a speech to major banking, to Goldman Sachs. She'd go give a speech, and they pay her a speaking fee of like $250,000, $350,000. That's a right out in the open fucking bribe.
Oh yeah,
That's a complete bribe out in the open. Who charges $250,000 to go talk for 30 minutes? Fuck off with that shit. That's complete nonsense. Now, if you had the secrets to life, you still wouldn't charge $250,000 to go speak for a half an hour.
no, you sell your book and people don't believe you.
Yeah, and so it's right out in the open, dude. It's right out. What am I? A major bank pays a politician $250,000 to come talk for 30 minutes, and we're just all supposed to go like, yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine. Nobody, when people would question that, no one argues with it. They just completely push it off the table and go, whatever. I'm not interested in that topic.
These things are hidden in plain sight on purpose because the more you hide something and we find out about it, the more we want to know what's going on. But when you have bribes happening under the very thin veneer of like, oh, your speaking fee because your words are made out of diamonds and gold, like, no.
Yeah.
This is a bunch of bullshit that's being shoveled around and people are pretending it's gold because the real gold has been stacked away and locked up, and then now we don't even use it to trade.
When Goldman Sachs pays $250,000 to hear Hillary Clinton speak, you're telling me they have no alternative motive other than just a really solid speech? You're telling me that money isn't any kind of bribe or isn't any kind of pay-to-play kind of situation? Fuck off. What are we, children? What are we, 10-year-olds? We're adults here, man. And it's embarrassing that people want to ignore that issue. It embarrasses me as a fucking human being with a brain.
It's yeah, you're absolutely right. It's kind of like allowing a bunch of 10-year-olds to run the government, and then all the adults are like, let them. Look how cute they are. Look at
That's adorable.
you can't put a kid in prison. Look at that. Look, they didn't know any better. Her
She
mind,
didn't.
her mind,
Yeah,
shit.
she put a bunch of private emails on a public server and is taking $250,000 for a speaking fee. There's nothing wrong with that. It's totally fine. No biggie.
Okay, to anyone watching right now, I just need to point out that for a long time there were rumors about the Clinton family's ties to organized crime syndicates. They are an organized crime syndicate. This is something you need to understand. The drug trade, the child trafficking trade that they are now officially connected to, all of this, the money laundering in order to have political gain by any means. This is what the mafia does. We look at these documentaries about the mafia, and we're like, and the police did an investigation in the 1930s, and they stopped all the mafiosos from running the organized crime syndicate. The end, and everyone's just like, yay, no more bad guys. But in actuality, the mafia never stopped existing. There's organized crime syndicate that has looped its tendrils through every portion of our government, to the point where when JFK mentioned it, he got shot, and that was a while back. That was when they were still trying to figure out the whole color film, color TV kind of shit. So like, we're in this era where technology is so advanced that we can pass information in moments, in a second, across the world. And we're supposed to believe all this horseshit now? No, it's so obvious now, but so many people are on these big pharma drugs that it just keeps a lot of the masses lulled. Like,
well, that is one of the, to me, you're kind of talking about one of the mechanisms of capitalism is this idea of the complete wrapping up in power of the individual, of just, hey man, worry only about yourself, only worry about your day-to-day, take care of yourself, make sure that your shit's in order. You're the big man. You're gonna make $1 million one day. You just keep working. It's all about you, baby. And so whenever anybody hears this, evidence that it is obvious to point out that there's something majorly wrong with the system, it's this experience of cognitive dissonance of just going, not real. That doesn't exist, because that really makes me have to think, and that really pushes me outside of, I got to go to work today, and I got to do that. It's the mechanisms of capitalism are keep everybody just comfortable enough that they don't start blowing shit up, but just uncomfortable enough to where they can't sit back and have a time to think freely for themselves.
I couldn't agree with you more. This just reminds me of when I was a lot younger. I would say 10 years ago. Okay, about 10 years ago, nearly. I am figuring all this stuff out as a kid. The government's corrupt. I don't exactly know why, because I wasn't really old enough to figure out all these connections. I'm still figuring out all these connections. We're still taking notes, trying to figure out where this web leads in some way, shape, or form. But I just remember having a blowout argument with my grandparents. Like, I had lived with a buddy of mine when I was 16, and then because I was still young and kind of like immature, well, definitely immature, I moved in with my grandparents for a couple of years, maybe about a year or so. But that whole time, I was so into trying to figure out conspiracy theories, and I was looking into aliens and trying to believe all these crazy things. But it always came back full circle to how corrupt the government is and nobody wanting to do anything about it, and how it seemed to me as a young child, I really wasn't a child at that point. I was a teenager, but I just felt like everyone was brainwashed, and I also had this rebellious nature. So I'm getting in arguments about how everyone's brainwashed, and my grandparents are like, yes, we know the government's corrupt. What do you want us to do about it? Like, we know that something's wrong with the world. What do you want us to do about it? And it just kind of made me break down. It made me realize that this is the modern day conditioning we all have, because I have the same kind of, these are the same arguments or debates you would have with anybody closest to you or not. Like, okay, well, the military should be there. Should they or should they not? well, there's this corruption here and there's this corruption there. And then the guy in the military that's been doing what he thought was the right thing his whole life to protect his country from bad guys and from external forces, he's like, well, what am I supposed to do about it? I'm doing what I think is the right thing. It's like, well, you're not supposed to help kill innocent people. And as long as you're not doing that, then maybe let's say you are doing the right thing because you're stopping people from hurting other people. Cool. But you need to keep going back and looking at these sources of corruption and actually stop them from funding the rest of the governing factors of the world, because if you're not doing that, it just keeps feeding itself until it seems impossible to control, until it seems impossible to do away with. We shouldn't be the only ones trying to have this discussion. I know we're not, but I'm saying, like, keeping it on the topic of government reform, of just system reform in general, like reforming every different kind of cycle or pattern we have on this nation in order for it to be more synergistic. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, yeah, and there's a part of me, and this seems kind of pessimistic, but there's a part of me that feels like the worse off America is, the better off America is, in the way that,
Point maybe.
like, the people I know in my life who give the least amount of shit about what's going on, the people who are the most blind to the hard, cold facts of the world, are the people I know that have a lot of money, they grew up with a lot of money, they went to a nice college, they spent, all of their, early, teenage years and college years just drinking and having all their shit paid for and having their parents take care of their rent. Those are the people that I see in my friends group who just don't, all this serious shit's going on, and I don't see them post a goddamn thing about it. They're not paying attention to it, and it's because they're on the upper echelon. They're comfortable, and they could give less of a fuck about what's happening to Syrian people.
I'll agree with you in the majority, but at the same time, I have met some that are in those same circumstances that really have gone outside their personal box, or have broken out of that echelon just to see what life is like, to make sure that they're not the people they feared they would be. You know what I mean? And I've met people that have had very comfortable backgrounds in life, but still have faced adversity because they have family members that come from different parts of the world. And it helps them understand the kind of poverty that exists in different parts of the world in order for them to appreciate the wealth that has been acquired in America. So there are wealthy families, and I don't mean wealthy in the billions. I'm talking in not even like officially wealthy compared to like maybe, let's say, middle class America. But
Right.
I'm just saying that some of these families do understand that something is wrong, but they are protecting what's theirs. It's a very tribal sense of survival, or even just like, that family survival it's like you can't really get rid of that. It is something that is hardwired into us. But
Mm.
you're absolutely right in saying that, like, the higher up you are in these echelons and these tiers of wealth and financial stability, the less likely you are to jump out of this bubble because you're scared it's going to pop. And I have
Right.
a feeling where I just hit this niche where I have the ability to do the things I want day by day, and I've never really had this ability in my life before. And
Right.
I'm trying to keep caring about these external factors.
Right, and that's, where I'm at is kind of a similar point. Is I got so fed up with the cycle of working 40, 50 hours a week and just being so goddamn tired and uh, just fed up with everything that I quit my fucking job, and I was like, I'm just gonna start selling the shit that I own and live off of that and do little odd jobs here and there so I can stay afloat. And honestly, it's making me happier to be able to dedicate myself. I don't mind being poor. I've been poor for a long fucking time.
Me too.
So it's one of those things where, like I was saying, the worse off America is, the maybe the better chance we have of waking up, and the better chance we have of actually solving our problems. Because I think that's why we're seeing such a big resistance nowadays, is that the bottom half of America, over 50% of America makes less than $30,000 a year. You know, the majority of us aren't making much money. The majority of us are living paycheck to paycheck, and the only people who seem to be doing fine are they only seem that way because they're up to their eyes in debt. You know,
Yeah.
they've got $100,000-$200,000 in debt that they might never pay off by the time they're dead.
I was raised by a father that had really great intentions, but also misused the debt system that we're born into. And I can't say I didn't do any differently because I feel like I'm my father's son, where I narrowly avoided some serious debt issues, and so I don't like to use a credit card. I like to, I like to make sure that I'm doing all this freelance work and it just kind of balances out with the rest of my living situation.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it puts you in this loop of like you don't have the ability to leave where you're at without causing it to hiccup. So you need to sit
Right.
there and take care of this cycle. And if you leave it, it may stop working. And even if you do care about the other problems in the world, it's like, well, I need twice or three times or four times as much funding to take care of other problems in the world while taking care of my house. It's like
Right.
one of the like a couple episodes back, I was telling you that I was being the optimist I am and saying I'm going to build self-sustainable homes all over the world and save the world through those means,
Mm-hmm.
redistribute wealth and put that wealth towards building self-sustainable homes. And even if I'm not the one doing that, pushing that idea, that would be a great thing to happen. And I think a lot of people in America or a lot of creative minds have similar plans and ideas, but the problem is we're stuck in our own daily loops that we can't really break out of without working together as a community to change these things day by day.
Right. Right, man. And that's, it's a weird thing to think that as people get poorer, as Americans have a harder time with their own personal lives, that things will get better. But I think that they will. I think it's the whole cliche, the night is darkest just before the dawn, and I feel like that's something that we're starting to experience here in America. Like, the whole world is experiencing these fucking shitty, horrible things. And some people are starting to answer the call of, well, we need to change. We need a better way of living. We need a more intelligent way of running our society. And in America, it's almost like that fire is just starting to get lit in a real meaningful way. That's why Bernie Sanders saw such a great turnout. Is he was speaking to the people who feel like he was saying to the people, you are being fucked over. People are screwing you out of your benefits, of your right to live a prosperous life as a human being, and it's time to stand up. And that's why he had people, in the just in the thousands showing up at every single speech and every single event he did. He had more support than any other candidate. But then, of course, the system, made some adjustments to make sure that support wasn't actually
The
actualized.
media blackout, that was really terrifying, where like if you posted the exact picture on Facebook would take it down. How is that not obviously fucking with the social media? Like, how is that not obviously fucking with freedom of speech? Hey, this is the guy everyone actually truly supports, and the forces running the mainstream media are like, no, you don't see anything in that camera. Do you see anything? No, then that means it's not there. Can you hear
Not
something?
happening.
Oh, don't worry about it. If you can hear something, it's just your own imagination. Like,
Yeah, I think it was. I forget. I think it was MSNBC or something that there was when they were having I forget the exact details, but I remember there was some sort of there were two speeches going on. Hillary Clinton was speaking, and Bernie Sanders was speaking, and Donald Trump was supposed to be speaking. In the near future, in a couple of hours, and I think it was NBC that just ran a picture of Hillary. They ran Hillary Clinton speaking, and then after her speech, Bernie Sanders was speaking. But instead of airing his speech, they just aired Donald Trump's empty podium, just sitting there for an hour, waiting for him to get up there and talk. And it's like, when you're not even giving this guy the opportunity to speak to the American people, you're doing a great disservice to those people, and you're really just showing your bare ass to the public, to anyone in the know. You're really flaunting how you're rigging the system and what you're doing against the American people.
it's
You're not allowing them to participate in democracy.
it's like when the Joker paints ha 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 on something serious that
Uh,
Gotham was trying to do for the city. Like, hey, we reformed this, we reformed Arkham Asylum to take in, all sorts of criminally insane people and actually try to take care of them. And then right before that happened, it's like just bust open and there's red paint that says ha 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 on it. It's the same thing, metaphorically speaking, like the corporate entity or entities behind fueling the mainstream media tend to do this every time free thought seems to leak out a little too much. But one
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to point out in lieu of this whole conversation is, instead of thinking it's so impossible for this nation to suddenly turn around and do something different, look at the resources we are wasting on war. And I do
Mm-hmm.
say wasting, and it can be debated on if we are wasting them or not. But I'm saying this because if you took the resources and technology and all the black budget funding and all the secret technology we had buried deep underground, literally and metaphorically, and we just turned it all inside out, we would have
Mm-hmm.
enough resources and the appropriate kind of technology to educate the masses, to feed the hungry, to, like,
Well, and think of this, man. I mean, we just dropped $100 million worth of missiles on Syrian government property. You take that kind of money, you re-engineer it. I mean, like right now, we've got real heroes of the world that exist, like Elon Musk, man. Elon Musk has created solar paneling roofing tiles, and the fact that we aren't immediately just going, oh, that's totally worth investing in. Let's allocate half the fucking budget that we're spending on the military, and let's have we could create millions of jobs going out to every American home and replacing their roofing with solar roofing, and now all of a
idea,
sudden we have infinite sustainable energy for everybody in America.
dude.
That's a possibility. That's a reality we could be living in the next 10 years. But that's not good for the electric companies. That's not good for the oil companies. That's not good for there comes a time when we got to stand up and go, I don't give a fuck what's good for corporate interests. This shit's good for the American people.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just good for the American people. It's even better for the people across the world that don't have nearly the same amount of resources or technology that we've been investing in for so
Mm-hmm.
long. And I'm not, it is a generalization because, like, Japan has, a slew of innovations that we're trying to keep up with as well. But I'm also talking about third world countries that have nowhere near this amount of food or shelter. We have the ability to create self-sustainable homes with solar panel tiles, and, like a weatherproof dome that grows its own food, that can run its own water 3 times through, and then that black water is recycled through a banana tree, and then it all starts over again. Like, if you can set that up across the world, there would be less of these problems of, like, children who have never had the ability to have a life
Mm-hmm.
starving. They're no longer starving. They're educated. They have a self-sustainable home that nobody has to worry about paying about. Are you good? Are you cool with that, America? You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to put your money towards someone else once these houses are built. They pay for themselves, like that. And there
And
doesn't
it
have to be money involved past a certain point. Like, okay, yeah,
right.
cost
And it
gonna cost, oh, I don't know, $100 million instead of shooting off these 60 Tomahawk missiles. How about we just build some self-sustainable homes in Africa
right.
or
Yeah, no,
Syria,
that
or Syria maybe, please? I don't know.
and at what point do we look at this as crimes against humanity, man? When you have the ability to correct major issues, and instead you waste your resources propping up corporate interests, that seems to me to be a crime against American people, to be a crime against people all over the world. And people need to be held accountable for this shit, and we need to take it seriously, man. We need to start considering things in that way and stop going, well, it's, the business interest. It's these guys have the money, and if they want to invest their money in the... No, fuck off, dude. The reason we have society is because we're trying to make better for the human beings in the equation. And when our decisions as a country are miserably bad for the majority of people in the world, the majority of people in the country, and they only really benefit a tiny percentage of the world population. What are we doing? What are we doing? It's like I'm sitting at home and I'm hungry and I've got the money to buy food, but instead of buying food, I pay this dude to come in my house and kick me in the nuts. It's like what at what point do we realize that that's retarded? That that's a fucking stupid thing to do?
Yeah, and the guy kicking you keeps telling you every time that it's going to be better next time or different, or that
Yeah.
next time there's going to be world peace, and the next time he kicks you in the balls again.
Yeah, it's like I pay somebody to bring me a muffin, and he comes to my house and kicks me in the balls and is like, "Oh, bro, I left the muffin, but I'll bring it next time. Don't worry. Call me back next time, and I'll definitely have the muffin. I'm still probably gonna kick you in the Jennies, but I'll bring the bran muffin next time as well."
So it's interesting to me to think how much money is being spent on killing people to prove a point that may or may not be the accurate point to make, when we could just be redistributing that to literally save the entire planet. And how cool would America suddenly be if we redistributed our wealth to save the rest of the planet? Like, okay, think of it this way. You just said, how are we not already considered to be committing war crimes or crimes against humanity? When is it considered crimes against humanity? Well, I personally think maybe to the rest of the world it is, and that's why we're treated the way we are. Like, if you look at it in the sense that we're from here, and every time you go visit, you always have a handful of people that are like, "Oh, you're from America, huh?" That's definitely happened to me.
Right.
Anytime you even seem to come off a certain way, people are like, "Oh, you're from America." And yeah, it's the accent, but it's also the reaction you have to certain events. I watched a guy get all his chicken nuggets stolen from him right after standing in line and talking to him the whole time. He bought them. He sat down at a little wooden table behind a pub, and it was this dude's birthday. It was a newly met acquaintance. This was years ago. This dude, Eamon Kelly, I believe was his name. Shout out, Eamon, if you're watching this. And this dude, I believe his name was Taylor. He and I were just kind of talking and shooting the shit. He went and got these nuggets, and we went and sat back down. And there's a group of kids just walks up to him. And they're like, "Oh, can we have some?" And they just all start laughing, and they all just take all the nuggets and eat them and walk away. Like, at least the majority of them, if not all of them. And he was like, "I just bought, and he just kind of was like, "Oh," and like he just acted like, "Well, that's what happens." And so me being me, my natural reaction is like, "Whoa, you just fucking bought those." So I stood up and I pointed to the guy who like initiated the whole thing. I was like, "Hey you, hey," and he's like ignoring me. I'm like, "Hey buddy, you're a dick." And he just looks up at me and he's like, "Are you from America?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, I don't know if he said, "Are you from Texas?" No, he's like, "Are you from America?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then like literally everyone laughed in this little group behind the pub. Because, everyone was young enough to be drinking because the drinking age is a little bit different. So it was like a bunch of high schoolers. And I'm like able to drink legally out of this pub for the first time. And I'm like standing up for this one British dude I just met, and then like everybody else is like, "You don't get it, do you, American?" And it's just like, what? Why are we treated different? Well, maybe there's a lot of factors behind it, and depending on where you are, it does also determine that as well. But like, if American forces keep coming to a place and attacking them for good reasons, and then sometimes those good reasons turn out to be totally bullshit, and then even still, there aren't reasons, and that people are just doing it for mindless fun, like, that's terrifying and terrible. And of course people are going to create like armed militias to protect themselves from Americans and get the wrong idea of America, because when they meet the tourists are totally nice and like, "Oh, this place is beautiful. It's it's very different, and it's not as it's like the systems work differently and the culture is different and the beliefs are different, and you do have to be careful where you go and depending on where it is in the world. But at the same time, like, we don't get a chance as people to represent who we truly are because our military is too busy representing us as a war factor, as a war machine,
Right, and that's where the responsibility, it comes down on us. That's one of the big reasons I want to do this podcast and have these conversations. Is this is a part of me taking some responsibility and being like, look, we need to talk about this shit and we need to get this out in the open, because if we're not talking about it and we're not being honest, we're really gonna just keep walking down the same shitty path that we've been walking down, and it's not gonna end up anywhere good. Do we need to go into another world war for us to wake up and realize what's happening, or can we just all agree that shit is going in a bad direction and there's still time to change it? There's still resources, there's still manpower that we can steer this ship in a new direction, because we're heading right for a fucking iceberg, and we need to acknowledge it.
Well, I think you make a good point in saying, do we have the resources and do we have the means to do this? I don't think it's really a question of that. It's, are we ever going to reallocate those means and resources? Like, reallocate those resources into new means, I guess is a better way of wording that. Because
Mm-hmm.
as long as our intention is to attack other people with little to no evidence to do so, we're not going to get that shit done. But we do have the technology and we do have the resources, to the point where Ben Rich was saying we have the technology to go to different parts of the galaxy, or the universe, even though we're still using primitive rocket-based fuel publicly, in terms of like showing people that we can shoot space shuttles off. Oh, good job. Yeah, but since 1947, we have had crystal-based technology, the microchips in computers, and then also fiber optics were examples of this reverse-engineered technology that no one was supposed to know about, that was heavily covered up. And then you have someone that worked at the beginnings of Lockheed Martin and Skunk Works, or Lockheed Martin Skunk Works facility, and on his deathbed, he's like, "Yeah, we have all that technology," and that was years and years ago. That was almost 50 years ago. No, probably more than 50 years ago. And it shows that we have all the money we need. We have all the technology we need. It doesn't. We're not having an alien conversation right now. I'm talking about the means to an end. I'm talking about the ability to change everything in a fell swoop. If we have the ability to change everything violently in one fell swoop with $90 million moves, like you're playing chess, but every move of a pawn costs you 90 million fucking dollars. If you're making those kinds of moves, you should be making them in the right directions. Okay, $90 million reallocated towards taking care of these kids,
Otherwise,
families.
you're just seen as a hypocrite. It's so hypocritical for us to be like, how would we pay for health care for all American citizens? Well, how the fuck do we pay for $100 million in bombs in a decision made like that?
That's
It doesn't make any fucking sense.
That is the question of the day. I think that's a very good point to make.
I think so too, man. I mean, and we can come back to this later because I think it might be a good point to end on. I got a couple things to take care of, some midday stuff to take care of before we do the late night show. But I think on that point, it really is important for us to start asking those questions. When we see shit like Donald Trump pulling the trigger overnight on dropping $100 million worth of bombs, we shouldn't be having this passive conversation of, well, is that okay, or that's when we need to go, hold on, everybody stop, that's not okay, we need to pause everything right now and discuss this together, because Donald Trump just dropped $100 million worth of fucking bombs without any kind of approval from anyone. And that's where we really need to step up and start having some serious talks.
Right before, to conclude this, I want to say the metaphor I was thinking of is that there's literally a group of people in a room with a two-way mirror, and we as the audience are on the other end, and we're watching each person that represents like different parts of the world holding guns at each other, and one of them, us, just shot the gun at the dude that wasn't, as far as we know, wasn't holding a gun. Or maybe they are, but it was like held down at their side, right? The metaphor is more so along the lines of it's reflecting the fact that we can't do anything about it at this point, because we're just standing on one end watching, not able to say anything into the room to change the events. We're just like, oh shit, this is happening right now.
Right, regardless of where we're at, someone just pulled the trigger. We pulled Donald Trump pulled the trigger. We fired missiles. And that's the opposite of a peaceful option. That is the definition of peace is not pulling the trigger, and we just pulled the trigger. So, we're still. It's going to be seen whether or not we're going to try and enter a war with Syria, whether or not that's where our main goal is, whether we're going to go to war with their allies in Russia, but regardless of it. The act is very, very serious, man, and it needs to be taken seriously, and we need to stop, the conversation of like, it had to happen, man, it needed to happen. No, it fucking didn't. If you believe that we had to drop those bombs, you're full of shit. You're full of shit, and it's about time that kind of bullshit gets called out.
All right, well, I think think this is a good time to wrap it up. But to anyone that's watching this, thank you very much for watching. We hope that you join us tonight. What about 7? Maybe let's call it 7:30.
Yeah, typically we try and get things going around 7:30. As we know, the shit comes up. We'll try our best to be pointing it, but we'll see. We'll be around 7 o'clock, 7 to 8 is when we'll get things kicked off, and we'll have probably some more serious conversations. But the night show typically is also about having a little bit more fun. So I think even in the wake of all the bad news we're seeing recently, we can still have a little fun, tell some scary stories, tell some jokes, and enjoy ourselves tonight a little bit.
Try to lighten the mood a little bit and gain a better perspective on things for tomorrow too.
Absolutely, man. Well, Lantern, thanks again, of course, for joining me this morning. We'll have a little bit more of a chat later on tonight, and yeah, we'll hopefully see some of our viewers then as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.